Hey, my name is Salman, I am a Microsoft intern, and welcome to my coding interview preparation guide. Don't forget to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button down below. Let me know what you want to see next, and that will be greatly appreciated on my end. So let's get started. And why do we need to prepare for coding interviews? We can go on a long discussion of why I think or you think coding interviews are just rubbish. But, we can't hate the game. We have to play the game because that's pretty much one of the only ways to get these jobs nowadays. We can't just go to an interview and be like, nah, I'm too good for your coding interviews. Yeah, forget it. We can't do that. We just have to prepare. I find it quite fun, and I can give you ways to make it fun as well. This can involve your friends, yourself. If you have no friends, don't worry. I might not have any friends either. We can be friends, and I will try help you. I used to actually set up interview preparation calls with people and try to help them. So this is me giving back to you as a free resource on YouTube. So let's think about why companies actually do this in the first place, because we want to understand and see where they're coming from, because that will help us address and answer problems and questions in a way they want. So they want to be able to assess the way you think. Now that's important because I will say that in my first thing, I guess. They want to assess the way you think and not whether or not you can solve a problem. So number one is, don't worry if you can't solve a problem, okay? Because they want to know how you think, how you interpret a question, how you go about a question in the real world. On the job, you might not know everything, and that's to be expected. But how you think about things, how you come up with possible solutions, how you break down problems and lay it out, how you write code, whether or not you're using variables, whether or not you're doing object-oriented programming, those are all necessary aspects which will be assessed possibly in your coding interview. So, don't stress over whether or not you will pass or fail based on your solution. You could literally solve the problem, had no communication to the person who's interviewing you. You could not have any coherency with the way you did your program. You might not have any concern about time complexity, space complexity. These are all things you should think about regarding how you should go about doing your coding interview, okay? So let's actually talk about that. So first off though, let's talk about languages. Like, what language do you want to use when you do programming interviews? Now, this sort of depends. So I like to have a tool set and pick from there. So my default languages I tend to use is either C# or Python. Now you might think, hey, those are kind of, very different in syntax. That's the point, okay? You have Python where you don't have to explicitly say which variable types you are using, the data types, but in C#, you have to say if you're using a string, an int, a double, a float. You have to mention this. So now think about why would you use Python? Why would you use C#? Where sometimes you want to mention the types in C# here, and sometimes you don't want to in Python. Now, okay, so if you're in a whiteboarding scenario, or if you're in a scenario where you want to just type faster, then yes, Python's really good for that. But if you don't want to speak as much and you want to show them that you can code and you don't have time to speak, just typing it and putting your types there is good, because maybe the person who's interviewing you doesn't know what you're talking about, or they are not as good as you in English or something, or they just don't understand your accent. Then just having it in C# is really good, because it's a common understanding that, okay, a string, a float, an int, whatever language, if you put your types, it's that sort of idea. But if it's like whiteboarding, you don't have that much space, so I would prefer to use Python in that scenario. say, for example, you have to have a dictionary within a dictionary. Any of you who do like the C languages or Java, you know how long that takes to write out. Just doing a dictionary, and then you put your type, and then you have to say it equals a new dictionary of that type. Then if you're doing a dictionary in a dictionary, you have to do a dictionary of the type of a dictionary of a type. Then you have to double angle bracket, and then you have to do equals new. Yeah, you get what I mean, and then you have to type that all again. But in Python, you just do double square brackets, and that's it. So when you're in whiteboarding, that's so much easier. So that's one thing to think about. And then, like, again, it's about this time and space complexity, okay? So when you have time and space complexity, you want to think about, is your solution really the most optimal solution? Okay? Is there another way you can be doing this? Now, if you only arrive to the least optimal solution, then that's fine. But maybe at least say, okay, you could optimize this and give them ways you can optimize it, because that at least shows that you're thinking about it if you can't do it. And that's another thing. It doesn't matter if you get the most optimal solution. If you can't get the most optimal solution, try do a brute force method, and then go from that brute force method and do a slightly better optimization, and then a slightly better optimization. And that shows that, you're able to think about these things. You're able to at least start on something when you have no approach at the beginning. Okay, so there's this concept as well, which you want to implement in your coding interviews, called introspection. So introspection is a term which we use in psychology, and it's just saying what you think. Okay, so they want to know what you're thinking. If I am interviewing someone and I'm like, hey, can you reverse a linked list? And then they just splurt out code on the board where they're just manipulating the pointers and blah, blah, blah. They get the solution, but they haven't communicated it to me at all. Then yes, that's impressive, but how impressive is it if, you're just putting the code on the board? Like, you could have memorized that. You want to, even if you haven't memorized it, which I advise not doing, because you want to be able to learn how to code, not just memorize things. Just explain it, because the person who's interviewing you might not know the language you're doing either, okay? And they want to know what you think, not whether or not you can come up with a solution. In the real world, are you going to be a silent programmer and just do everything without speaking? That's one thing they're analyzing, possibly, your communication skills, whether or not you can tell and explain your code, or if you can just code, okay? Again, they're going to be working with you probably a lot of the time. So knowing whether or not you can talk and communicate and explain your code to someone else, that's a useful skill. And if I code something, okay, this is the example I'd like to give. If I code up some legacy code and 20 years pass, let's not say 20 years, okay, I'm only 20. Let's say, okay, you code something and then you need to explain it to someone else, and they're new to the team, and they would want to understand your code. You've got no comments, anything, and if you can't literally explain code and explain what you're doing to them, then that's useless, okay? So showing that you can explain your code during the interview is very good. What other things do you want to think about? Whether or not you can do object-oriented coding. If you can demonstrate that using classes, things like that, that's pretty useful, because that's one positive point. Being able to neatly use variables, use consistent variable names, and not things like number, variable, random, choice 2. Like, if it's related to what you're doing, then it's really useful. I remember I had this coding interview, and I was using like X, Y, and Zs, and then I think it was X, Y, and Zs. I can't remember, but what I do remember was me trying to then change my variable names later, so that it was easier for the other person to understand, and it just confused them. Even if it even if it makes sense to you, and you can understand what these X, Y, and Z mean, it like that. Okay, fair enough, that might be impressive, but like, if the interviewer doesn't understand what you're doing, they're just gonna be like, okay, whatever, because that will waste time, because they need to spend extra time trying to understand what you're doing. Then secondly, like, they might just give up and be like, okay, this person just can't use variable names. It's like, that's the sad truth. Okay, so just make everything readable. Make sure you're using object-oriented programming. Make sure you speak about what you're saying. Make sure you are, if you can't solve the problem, try an easier solution. Start with brute force, then try to optimize it as you go. So that's really the actual interview things. How do you actually prepare? I use this website a lot called Leetcode, so you can literally just go through each programming problem, and I used to set the goal of doing at least one a day, and you get better, and then you start doing more, and then you do harder questions. And don't worry if you look at a solution and you're like, hey, how am I going to be able to come to the solution in the real world, in the real interview? That's okay. You just keep practicing. Have this growth mindset that you will eventually be able to. You start to recognize patterns. No one becomes a pro skater out of the gate. Okay, you have to practice. No one's pro at anything really when they start, but you just give it practice. You give it time. You will be able to do it. That's what I'm telling you, and that's what you got to believe, because that no one starts like that. Okay, yes, there might be someone, but you, if you're not there yet, you can get there. Okay, so that's really that. Let's also think off the top of my head. Resources. You have loads of YouTubers online. You have CS Dojo. You have Tech Lead. You have Joma. You've got so many resources online for you to check out. So I do recommend looking at those videos. Tech Lead has this email thing which you can subscribe to get one coding problem a day, so that's quite useful because it just goes to your inbox. It's free to use. I'm not being paid by him to say this. But yeah, it's very useful. And yeah, I do recommend also checking out Grokking, the coding interview course, as well as Cracking the Coding Interview, the book. And oh yes, so different kind of coding interviews which you can come across. There are not just these kind of Leetcode style questions, but possibly debugging style questions where you have to fix code. Also, again, you have this sort of create an application type of program that is sometimes a bit longer. You can maybe get a whole day to do that. My advice for that is just persevere and do it. You will learn from it so much, and they are rare, but that's a good assessment on whether you can actually build an application, and they might end up using it. So that might be a bit scummy, but at the end of the day, you want the job, right? So you'll probably do it. But yeah, do realize that that's a possible thing. Also, yes, the different styles. You have paired programming style interviews. You have whiteboards. Make sure you always start from the top left of the board. Is this top left? And then you go down. Don't start from down here and then start curling around. You might think you have space, but yeah, especially if you're not doing Python, you'll probably run out of space. You might later on actually be asked, even if you've fit it down here in this small space, you might be asked to do another question, and then like, where do you put it? It's like, well, it becomes messy. So yeah, actually writing on a board, practice that. You can get really cheap sticky whiteboards which you can put on the wall for maybe like £1 possibly. Now I'm not trying to say I'm rich and saying £1 like that might be a lot, no, just use paper, just use paper and practice writing. Okay, £1, if you can spare that might turn into £50,000 salary. Okay, it's about what you invest in. Okay, let's not go down that route. Okay, so yeah, it's literally different. Go check out Pram. It's a great website to practice actual coding interviews. You can schedule them with people. I haven't used it myself, but I know a lot of people have, and it's a great resource. I used to set up coding interview calls with people, and I would just be doing coding interviews. I'd be helping. We'd be doing questions. It's fun. You do this with your friends. I do this quite a lot. If you're in the Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador community, I did this quite a lot with people there. So reach out to me if you want that. And yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed this video. I do have 5 other videos in my Get Your Dream Internship playlist, so do check that out. Let me know what you want to see next. Hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know what stage you are in your interviews so I know what kind of videos you want me to make. I hope you all are able to get whatever job you want, and I believe you will. And let me know if you do, and I will be there to congratulate you. Message me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and subscribe. Bye!